Hi, this is Will Lewis, and we're back for Season 3, Episode 7 of The Art of Outsmarting with Keith Mitnik. These last few episodes, we've been going through Keith's powerful packaging toolbox, some of the strategies he uses to make a difference in his clients' cases. And today, what we're going to be talking about in following up on our last episode of creating language of your case, today specifically talk about the language we use in closing argument, the language Keith uses in closing argument to make a difference for his clients.
Personal injury cases hinge on the details. ABC Legal, America's most trusted process server, simplifies every aspect of service, so you can focus on winning your clients' cases. ABC Legal-empowered process servers deliver documents nationwide and make 12 million attempts annually, with real-time GPS-tracked updates and proof available online. ABC Legal's simple and transparent services make life easy for your team and help you keep costs under control. Your clients deserve consistent, reliable, and accountable service of process. Sign up for a free account today.
Keith, welcome back. First thing, is a topic I'm interested in talking about today in closing argument is an issue that we obviously have in many of our cases, which is liability. We're faced sometimes with difficult liability cases. And to be able to convey that to the jury powerfully, to frame it for the jury, I know you have strategies for dealing with that. Can you talk about some of those for us today?
Let me start with kind of a more 10,000 feet concept of closing. Closing and opening are extraordinarily different. Closing is where you're going to win. You're going to set the framework to win your case. If you don't do it right, by the time you get closing, you probably have lost. So you got an opening, you've got to set the pathway, set the table for a just ending. Close, and you got to lay out what your evidence is, and you use to create the language of case so it has this framework. It carries that evidence that comes in pieces through. Time you get to closing is not a time to rehash opening. It's not a time just to keep going through all your evidence. Of course, you want to highlight some of your most important evidence. Of course, you want to deal with some of the low points where the defense has scored some points. It's not absent the evidence, but it is more to me. I've thought about it, and I have an analogy to make the point. What's the difference between opening and closing? And there's the story we all know of the three little pigs and the big bad wolf. And the three little pigs, the first pig builds his house, and he builds his house out of, what the hell was it? There's one sticks and bricks. What's the first one? Not twigs.
I wasn't ready for this sort of, test
All right,
today.
Twigs. We'll call them twigs. There's something else, but we'll call them twigs. He builds, the first one is, straw. First one's straw, second one's sticks, third one's bricks. Okay, straw. First little piggy builds his house, and he builds it out of straw. Well, along comes the wolf, and he says, little piggy, let me in, or I'm going to blow your house down. And the little piggy says, not by the hair on my chinny chin chin, and the wolf blows and blows the house down. Piggy runs to the next house, where his buddy is. And that house is built out of sticks. Big bad wolf comes down and says, little piggy, let me in, not by the hair on my chinny chin chin. And he blows and he blows and he blows that down. And those two little piggies run to save their life, and they go to the third piggy's house to build out a brick. The brick house, same thing. Little piggy, let me in, and not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. He blows and he blows and he blows, and he can't blow it down. Opening statement is building a brick house, because they're going to get up and they're going to go after your case and your client hard, and they're the big bad wolf, and they are going to blow the son of a bitch down if it's made out of anything but bricks. So that's how I think about opening. You got to build the brick house. So what's the difference come closing? Because minds are made up. Is it a waste of time? No, not at all. It is extraordinarily important, but for a totally different reason. Jurors are in two camps. Every now and then you got them all and you get a quick verdict. But usually 2 hours in and you're fretting and your ulcers are growing and bleeding, it's because you got a battle between some that ran astray and they ended up with a wolf, and others are in your brick house with you, and they're the two little piggies joining you in there. and you want your good jurors to win that battle. You want to galvanize them. You want to they're going to stay late, fight hard, and by creating the language of case, you're going to put the words on their tongues so that the other jurors who they're not going to ever really be with you, but your good jurors can convince them you're the ones going to give up. So you can go home. Not me. You're listening these good jurors, putting the words on their tongue, and you're putting steel in their spine, and you're taking the wind out of the sails of the bad jurors. That's what's happening in closing argument, which is different. Going back to our three little piggies. A lot of people don't know they stopped the story there. If you actually Google and look the three little piggy stories, there's an end to the story. And the piggies in the brick house, they hear the wolf on the roof, and he's trying to come down the chimney. And they got a fire, and they put a big kettle on, and they got boiling water. And when the wolf comes in, they drop the lid on him, and they cook the wolf. That's how the story really ends. Closing argument is cooking the wolf's ass. That's what you do in closing argument, because you built the brick house in opening. So let's take it into what are some of the issues that you want to cook them on. Because remember, you're not by the way, the other thing is you're really bringing home your damages. That's the other part of closing. But on liability, because we're talking about liability now, you now have built your brick house, and now you got to cook the wolf, meaning I've got to galvanize my good jurors. I got to put the fire under them so the water boils. I got to put the words on their tongue so they can drop the lid on it, so they can cook that damn wolf, who's the defense has convinced they got some little wolf cubs that are fighting for them back there.
And so let's talk about some of the issues we face in our real cases and how you've dealt with them in the past. And I'm going to start with one of the favorites that comes up: minimal visible property damage. We've all had cases where our client is very hurt, this pain's not going away, but if you simply look at the vehicles, it doesn't reflect the severity of the injury. How do you try to address that, to convey that to the jury and not let the defense send the jury off track and focus too much on, what was the cost of repairs? What does the bumper look like?
Great question. And it walks right in to one of these powerful language tools, which is an analogy. There's a little story that goes with it, which is kind of a broader, and it's not really analogy, but you're telling a story everybody knows kind of has the same impact as an analogy, and then the analogy. You need them both, and I'll tell you why. But now we're in closing argument. They've been parading the pictures around. You set it up in opening. You can't wait till close because they're going to get too much of a bang for their buck. You've already started the process by, number one, before you ever walked in court, you created the right language to talk about it. You never say low impact. That's wouldn't hurt a flea. That's their game. You say not a lot of visible property damage. Why? Because number one, it's accurate. Number two, it doesn't carry the same connotation as low impact. But number three, it has a built-in subliminal message of there may be more there than meets the eye. Lots of people who put their car in the shop after it's been in a crash, looks fine, never runs the same. So you may very well stumble on jurors who, when you say not a lot of visible property damage, they're thinking, yeah, there may be more there than we're seeing going on. So you get a little added benefit to it. So you created the right language to talk about it. Secondly, in opening, you then started the process of explaining to jury, because you can't go full blown into a bunch of analogies in opening because you're going to get objected to as argumentative. But you can start the process by saying something like, it's not about the bending of metal. It's about the unexpected, awkward jarring that causes this kind of an injury.
Not a lot of visible property damage. Can't hurt a fleas. One conclusion. Except it's not the bending of metal, it's the unexpected jarring, awkward torquing that causes this kind of injury at the hinge joints. So there's not a lot of visible property damage. They hired a doctor, paid him a lot of money, hire him all the time to assess this and said, believe him. He said that injury with those pictures caused an injury. He downplays the injury, but it caused an injury. They say it wouldn't hurt a flea. He admits it hurt the flea. There's more than one answer, and one makes a lot more sense. You've got degeneration. Therefore, that's the pain. That's not the only conclusion. There's another conclusion. You've got degeneration. That made your spine more susceptible to injury, which explains why this crash, it wasn't overwhelming. Some people would have walked away scot-free. They didn't. Why? They had a susceptibility. I could keep doing this all day of all their same crap they do. It all comes down to there's one conclusion from these facts, and it's ugly. And we expose it by showing that's not remotely correct. Here's another explanation right here that makes a hell of a lot more sense.
If you were talking about a death case, you'd be expecting the car to be torn to shreds. That's not the kind of injury here. It's wrong case, wrong facts. But on this kind of an injury, that's exactly what you expect. And there may not be a lot of visible property damage because, and now you can sneak a little bit of a analogy in. It's a precursor to the story you tell in closing. That's why grown-ups don't sneak up on one another like children do and shove them in the back. That's what you're going to hear. Why? Because someone's going to get hurt. Because grown-ups' spines you're going to hear are not as supple as those little kids and flexible, and someone's going to get hurt. Why are you doing that? Because when you say grown-ups don't sneak up on one another and shove them in the back unexpectedly, because everyone's going to cringe. And when they cringe, they get it. The cringe means, I've just stepped in your shoes and understand that can be painful, that could be hurtful. So you say that, and you say, and you're going to hear from the doctors. That's why you may see no bruise on someone you shove by, but they still can get hurt because it's that unexpected awkward jarring that causes this kind of injury. And then you roll into the science. That's opening. Now, closing, the gloves are off. You can go full bore. And so you bring it home. So this is the ending to it in closing. I don't know why it is. They keep showing these pictures to you folks. That's got nothing to do with causing this injury. We talked about an opening. And we talked about grown-ups don't shove each other in the back. I don't know why it is that little kids love to, boys, especially them boys, love to sneak up on their friends on playgrounds and shove them. I bet there are kids across America right now in some playground, someone's sneaking up on his buddy, shoves him, he falls down, jumps up, chases him across the playground, brushes himself off, squealing, they think it's fun. Grown-ups do not sneak up on one another and shove them in the back unexpectedly. Why? Because someone is going to get hurt. Their necks are not supple like those kids. And it may not leave a single mark. They're not going to have a big bruised back like someone beat them with a baseball bat, but they're going to be hurt. It's like, now we're rolling into the analogy. It's like, if someone were sitting in this chair and you put a chair like this and you want to put it if the jury was out here like this. I'm sorry, if the jury was out here, you turn it like this so the person's ear would be facing the jury. No one's sitting in the chair. You roll it out in front of the jury and say, if someone was sitting here and they had no idea I was coming and I came across the room, and now you start backing up, move to the other side of the room. You get on the other side of the room and you say, and I came across here, by all accounts, it's probably 5-10 miles an hour was the impact. Now, I don't know how fast that'd be on foot, but I bet I'd be getting it across this courtroom. And I'm not going to run here in my suit and tie and these dress shoes. But if I did, and someone had no idea I was coming, now you're moving towards the chair. And I hit the back of it. And you hit it, you don't want to get over carried away and be too theatrical, but you want to make your point. Hit it good and solid. Rock it a little bit. And that person went, ow, what are you doing? That hurt. How fair would it be? And now you turn the chair around so the back's facing the jury and point at it. How fair would it be to say, what are you talking about? That can't have hurt you. There's not a mark on the chair. It wouldn't be fair at all. Why? Because it's not about the mark on the chair. It's about that unexpected, awkward jarring that causes this kind of injuries. How do you know it? Well, because of the sequence of events, they didn't have the problem before it started here and it hadn't gone away. Because the doctor explained it and talked about those are the mechanics, especially at the hinge joint, or if it's low back, the hinge joint that would cause this kind of an injury, especially with torquing or twisting. And so when they get up in closing argument and they're going to talk, actually, I usually save it for rebuttal, and they've done it. And I said, so they once again have paraded those pictures around. Now you know better. You knew it in opening, you've seen the evidence, and they still will not give it up because what else are they going to talk about? That's the power of an analogy, and you set it up with a little bit of a story, and it tied in like a bookend into you got out ahead of it in opening, but now you're able to tell the fullness of the story to say, and here's your real message to the jury. They're not playing fair. That's just simply not fair. You know why? It isn't fair. I really want that. Now, if you're a brand new lawyer and you're 25, you may not worry about someone hitting your back. Most of your jurors are going to be older, like me. I'm 65. The minute I hear someone sneaking up on me and shoving me in the back, I go, God almighty. And as soon as you do that, no one is going to convince that person that shove is harmless.
And that's really the theme of our entire season here is, you talk about, you started the season, talking about packaging, and that packaging can have the connotation of, it's marketing, it's a gimmick. But what it really is, they're the ones who are, who are feeding this false, I'll call it a false narrative to be polite about it. And it's important for us to expose that. And the way we expose it is through the packaging of the case. Is that it's clearly when you draw on these common experiences, and I noticed what you did there. Everybody everybody was at the playground when they were 5 or 6 years old and remembers the game where you push people in the back. Everybody can relate to that concept of, boy, if look, I'm in my 40s and I don't want anybody running up and pushing me in the back. No less, you're right. Many of our jurors are in their 50s, 60s, or even later. It makes it very personal, and it exposes what they're doing in a different light, in the true light. They're trying to just isolate this single issue, and then you're putting context around it. And it, to me, it's genius. But what I love about it is it's the truth. I always say about trials, like trials are easy because we get to tell the truth. And the hard part is just exposing how they're misleading us, misleading that jury, off the path.
You said, because I'm always sensitive when I say packaging, because people think spin doctoring. And I'm thinking, if I'm anything in a courtroom, it's integrity. And so I always feel I need to explain when I say the word packaging, we're not talking about deceptive packaging. That's what they do. We're talking about truth in packaging. But packaging matters. And if you don't package, they're gonna do deceptive packaging. And the way you beat it's with truth in packaging.
We're either playing on our playing field or their playing field. That's what I always think about.
There's packaging going on.
Yeah.
Educate, provide context, create the language of your case, and then painting powerful pictures, which is just my way of saying metaphors. So those are the things in the toolbox. 1 is educate, 2 is provide context. 3 and 4 kind of go hand in hand, but I put them in 2 different categories. Creating the language of your case. If you're going to do packaging in the most powerful way, you have to pick the most powerful words for the package to communicate the conclusion you want it to communicate. Every word comes off our tongue, worry about it, or we'd be tongue-tied. But there are certain words that are going to stake out and define who's going to win the battle over conclusions, over the facts that are fixed. And those better be the right words, and it's worth your time to figure out what are the most powerful words that are unassailable. And I say unassailable because I can't tell how many times I've thought of a word, and then I thought, God, that's going to backfire. I cannot tell you how many times I've beaten the stew out of the defense for picking a dumb word. It was sounding good until I showed them how bad it was. And I don't want them to do it to me. And I've seen it done to plaintiffs' lawyers before. And I probably younger, I don't remember because I try to forget the worst of the worst. But I've probably done it. But I don't do it anymore because if it's going to be one of my power words, it's going to be vetted through my brain out one side and the other, and I may talk to 20 people about it. Because whatever the word, the phrases are, the analogies that I pick, they're gonna be perfect. Because they're too important. Because it is at the heart of the right conclusion versus the wrong conclusion. How we talk about them is everything about how the jury concludes from them. A wrong analogy When the lawyer gets up and says, he's right about that analogy, let me tell you why, boom, and you're going, it's fun to do it to them. It's no fun having it done to you. So think about it.
So you might as well do it, but you do it with integrity. It's like if somebody were to have a slip and fall and they're trying to act like it really didn't hurt them, you can take the same kind of story, like the shoving in the back. You remember when you were younger, probably in high school, sneaking behind someone about to sit down, your buddy, and pulling his chair out, and they sit down and fall on the ground? Everybody sings, I'm going to beat your ass, and everybody laughs, but they're not hurt. What grown-up would sneak up on, can you imagine sneaking up on me in this room and saying, Mitnik's about to sit, this is going to be funny, we're going to do a big horse laugh, and wheel this little chair out and back, and let me sit down on the ground.
Yeah, when's the last time that happened in the boardroom? You know, it just doesn't
happen.
Doesn't happen.
So that's a power of analogy in closing argument.
All right, you know, what as we're talking with this, you know, I'm going to keep testing you here. Another defense strategy that we see is, I know this is a word you don't like, cherry picking. That they're going to go through all of the medical records and they're going to find this line or that line that they can say supports their premise while ignoring a lot of the rest of it, and other strategies like that. How do you address defense cherry picking?
Sure. And by the way, I'm okay with cherry picking because everybody instantly knows what it means because I'm such a nut about the words. I always worry cherry picking sounds like you're picking the good stuff. And look, I don't want to sit here and listen to all the unimportant stuff. Go in, cherry pick. Don't waste my time. I worry. I think I'm over worrying it really, because I think most people understand cherry picking is a bad thing. But I just can't help myself. So I still occasionally use cherry picking, but I'm not overly comfortable personally with it. So I like to talk about cut and paste, cropping, zooming, photoshopping, those kind of words that everybody knows you're changing the whole picture from the true picture. So I typically call it cut and paste. And I have an analogy when they've done it. And it's the damnedest thing. They will take a medical record. Let's take an emergency room, because I've just seen this one so many times. And on the front page, it says neck pain. And your client had neck and back pain, but the neck pain got better. The back pain ended up herniation, surgery, injections, long-term problem. So your case is a back pain case, even though it started with the neck. But the neck probably was a sprain strain like they want to claim. The low back wasn't. They presented the same. By the way, they present exactly the same to start with. That's why people don't run to emergency rooms right away, a lot of these cases, because it feels like a sprain strain. They're sore, they're stiff, they're aching, but they think it's going to go away. Who wants to go sit in an emergency room for 4 hours? And then when it doesn't go away, what happens? The level of care goes up. Now you're going, your chiropractor says, you know, this should be gone by now. Your family doctor, they say, we ought to go send you to a spine specialist and get some MRIs. And now you get the bad news. It isn't a sprain strain. You got a herniated disc. So that's the evolution of it. But in that situation, emergency room record, front page says neck pain. Doctor writes a little history, complaining of neck pain. Says not one word about low back pain. You flip to page 3, and there's a little pain diagram your client filled out, and they marked in the low back. And it's like, who the hell would show the first record and think they're going to get away with it? They do it. I'll never get it. But I actually like when they do it, because then you get up and they do your client. You get up on redirect and you say, now they didn't show you this. And they look horrible. And you know what they'll do in closing argument? Put the same damn record. I'm like, what is going on here? But they do, and I always think...
I laugh because I'm thinking in my head, and I'm obviously not going to say
they're
the
on a
names of the
script.
lawyers I've seen try this, but you're exactly right.
You know, everyone listening, thank you for listening, because you know what you are? You're somebody who doesn't paint by numbers. You want to paint masterpieces freehand. You're using the art of outsmarting, the fun part that sets you apart, rather than just following some script. So this is how we take people that paint by numbers and follow a script, and we get big just verdicts because we're free painting, free thinking, and we're outsmarting. So this is one of those examples of outsmarting. So when they do it, The analogy that works, I like to use in closing argument, and I've used it in a bunch of different settings. We're sitting in Orlando here taping, so I'm going to use Orlando. You can use anything fits your region, but I'll use the Orlando one because I try a lot of cases here, and it's easier for me to just say it. We have a lake here in Orlando. It's called Lake Eola. I'm looking at it right out the window. It's got a little fountain in the middle of it, and it's got a bunch of swans, and they even have these big fake giant plastic swans people paddle around their paddle boats. Everybody in Orlando knows about it. It's surrounded by all these beautiful old cypress trees. I can say to Orlando jurors, say, when they keep using that emergency room record and these other records, and it's like cut and paste. They come in and just cut around and leave out the rest of it. That's like I could take a picture and zoom in really close of a swan and a cypress tree over here at Lake Eola. And you look at it and go, that's out in the countryside. But then I show the whole picture, back up a little and show the real picture. You see the skyscrapers in the background. I say, wait a minute, nothing be further from the truth. This isn't a picture from the countryside. That's downtown Orlando. That's what they're doing. They're snipping. They're cutting out all the facts around it. Now you see why we need you. And it just, now they're over there going, maybe I shouldn't go back to the well on that one more time. And it's more than just shutting it down. You shut that down the first time they used it. You know what you did then? You're motivating your good jurors to fight really hard because they don't like someone being intellectually dishonest to their face. And you know what you did to your bad jurors? They're not bad people, but they're bad for your case jurors. They got waylaid. Do they really want to fight for someone who keeps doing that kind of crap? You're taking the wind out of their sails. Now you're cooking the wolf, using an analogy like that. And like I say, I did one in tried a case in New York City. You know where I use? I use the rowboat pond in Central Park.
Yeah, I mean, that's
same thing.
Yeah.
I tried a case in St. Petersburg. There was a little lake called, I think they called it Mirror Lake, right outside the courthouse. I used Mirror Lake. Wherever you at, take a story like that. The point of the analogy is something that you could zoom in on and make it look like it was the countryside, when in fact, you got big, tall buildings. Nothing could be further from the truth. You're downtown.
How do we make a difference in the conclusions that are really where the battle line's drawn from a bunch of facts, most of which are fixed? Forget the bias stuff. That's a whole different model. That's for jury selection. We're now into persuading. We're now into winning at the beginning. Where does all this lead to? And I realize packaging, perspective. It's all about how you present the facts. I've used this analogy. I can't come up with a better one. If you've heard it, bear with me. I want to share it again because I really think it makes the point. If someone was at a grocery store and a lady lost her purse, and a man is caught on one of those eye-in-the-sky cameras that have all different angles, and one of the angles is like this, and right here are the sliding glass doors leaving the store, and here comes a man carrying a lady's purse, and if you look at that angle, you would conclude son of a bitch is a thief, he's leaving out the doors. But switch to the view from the eye-in-the-sky camera that's directly behind him, he's not leaving. He's heading straight for the information desk. He's not a thief, he's a good Samaritan. Facts didn't change. Perspective changed. We get to go first. Once you create the image in a juror's mind, it is damn hard to change the angle of the camera. So I thought more about perspective and circumstances. And then it came to me. What it really comes down to is how we package the facts. And I'm sensitive to the word packaging because I hate the first reaction when you're packaging. Most people think spin doctrine. We do truth in packaging to overcome deceptive packaging. We do not play games with packaging. That's not who we are. So I don't mean packaging in any remotely ugly, cutesy, tricky way. I mean in fundamental fairness and honesty way that drives us. But it's still packaging. And if you think about packaging, when's the last time you walked through a department store or looked at a window in a clothing store and the new stuff out for fall is just stacked up on a table? It's up on a mannequin. Why? Packaging. Madison Avenue is packed with ad people. Packaging. You look at a fir tree, it's just a damn tree. Looks like up north. Now stick a star on top of it and some baubles. It's a Christmas tree. Packaging really matters big time. And we're master packagers, just honest packagers.
It's great. And again, it's a way to expose them, the defense, leading the jury astray, the defense not, frankly, not telling the truth. But what it is, again, it's how we package the case. Circumstantial evidence. How do you address that?
Sometimes a lot of our cases are we got MRIs. We got, MRIs don't lie. You're going to see it with your own eyes, folks, that kind of thing. And that's a direct evidence case. But some cases, particularly when you get into liability, you got circumstantial evidence. And I always worry, and here's a great phrase that works with circumstantial evidence very well. Actions speak louder than words. So we're going to do both. I'm going to give you an analogy, and we're going to use an old adage. Actions speak louder than words. The defendant says that our client hit him, except he left the scene. Actions speak louder than words. Except his story's changed. The truth isn't a moving target, folks. If you're telling the truth, you tell it like it is. When stories start changing, actions speak louder than words. So that's a powerful old adage to call them out on liability. It can be a damage issue, but often that's a liability issue. Now, here's an analogy that I use to go with the old adage that has always worked well. It happens to be a true story for me, and you can come up with one similar for yourself. Always like if you're telling the story, let it be one that's true, because people sense when you tell it that this person lived it, and it has a little more authenticity, a little more authority, a little more gravity. But I use one with my daughter, and I say, it's like when you always know an analogy coming, it's like. I say, it's like when I was a younger lawyer, and my daughter was, I don't remember, probably 6, 7, 8 years old, somewhere in there. She wasn't allowed to have Coke before bed, but she loved Coke before bed. The reason she couldn't have it is because the caffeine would keep her up. She wouldn't sleep. And I was sitting at the dining room table working, and I hear her rattling around in the refrigerator right about bedtime. And I said, Jennifer, you're not getting into the Coke, are you? She goes, no, Daddy. I'm like, okay. Next, within 30 seconds, I hear, boom, startle me. I go come around thinking, make sure she's not hurt. And the refrigerator's open. The big 2-liter bottle of Coke is on the ground, spilling and spewing all over. She's got that little cup of hers, and it's run over down on her, getting on her PJs, and asked a very dumb question. But it called for direct evidence. And the direct evidence was, I said, Jennifer, you did get into the Coke. And she said, no, Daddy. Direct evidence. But folks, direct evidence is what someone says happened. And sometimes people, when they have a motive, say things that aren't so. Circumstantial evidence, while people hear the word circumstantial, they think, oh, that's weak. Sometimes circumstantial evidence is far more powerful than direct evidence, because it's the circumstances that tell you, common sense, that's what really happened. I don't care what they say. And in that situation, no, Daddy, was the direct evidence. The circumstantial evidence was the Coke spewing all over, the 2 liters on the ground, her sippy cup getting down on her PJs. And you know what? The defense or the defendant who says he had the red light or he had the green light, it's got Coca-Cola all over him because his actions speak louder than the words. And as soon as you do that, jurors chuckle. Now, I fixed a little screw up of my own in telling the story. I normally say circumstantial evidence can be far more powerful sometime and do the explanation, then cleanly run through the story. I had to drop it in the middle because I forgot it at the front end. But the story, or a story like that, people chuckle, and when they chuckle, you go, deliberation is going to be a little less stressful.
They get it.
They get it.
You know, it's funny. So I was telling, and I, as you know, I have young kids, and I had a circumstantial evidence issue in closing argument, telling a very similar story about M&Ms, and the defense objected and said, well, you know, Mr. Lewis is making this about his family and his kids. That's inappropriate. Judge sustained it. But I was already, you know, a little ways. And so, you know, I looked at the jury. I said, okay, well, let's just say a 4-year-old girl, not my daughter. And of course, everybody still got it. And so, you know, it's one of those things where that story, I think everybody can relate to, even if it hasn't happened to them, and they get it, they see it, they visualize it.
It's a cute story, but it's a powerful story.
Yeah.
And why did I come up with that? Honestly, because the word circumstantial evidence carries a negative connotation.
That it shouldn't.
And it shouldn't. But how many TV shows, police TV shows, you got the police, the detectives put the case together, and then it converts over to like a Law and Order. Now the prosecutor takes over. How many times you got a guilty as sin, horrible guy, everyone's pulling, forget him, he's terrible. And the prosecutor says, your case is entirely circumstantial, detective. I can't prosecute. Go get me some real evidence. And everybody's seen that over and over and over and over and over on TV, so it gets a bad name. And all you're doing is converting the bad name into the truth. It's often more powerful because it's what makes sense, not what was said by someone who has a very good motive to say something ain't so.
Yeah, and thankfully our burden of proof is not beyond a reasonable doubt either. So, you know, we've talked about a bunch of these strategies, and one issue that, you know, we all face at one point in our career is we get the sense that there's a particular juror, someone we want to strike during voir dire, that for a reason the judge didn't, think it was cause, and we had to leave on the jury, or maybe just someone who slipped by us, that we just get the sense is not with us for whatever reason. Now it's closing argument, and you know you've got that one holdout, and maybe they ask certain questions. You know, in Florida, you can obviously, you know, the jury gets to ask questions to the witnesses. Maybe that was a telltale sign. Maybe it's a look on their face. How do you address that?
Maybe it's this.
Yeah, maybe exactly.
Every time you
Maybe
walk
it's
in the
the
room.
body language, right? But we've been there. It's a real tough feeling to talk to someone who doesn't want to hear it. What do you do? What do you do in that situation?
We all in Florida. It's funny. I was talking to Nick Riley, who's a dear friend, and we were talking about this very issue, and he was telling me a story about I had this juror who just hated me. We both started laughing. He said, I mean, he hated me. We've all had it. Well, in Florida, they get to write their questions out, and the juror reads it after we approach and vet it, make sure it's an askable question. And I had this guy who just was asking terrible questions, and his body language made me remind me of Riley's case. I mean, I would stand up to do something, and I had to make myself not look at him. Because number one, I knew it's a lost cause. I'm not going to win him over. It was that bad. But he would make me, my confidence would be rattled. I'm like, this guy just, everything I'd say, he's like, and I'm like, I can't look at him. I would skip him with my eyes and look at everybody else so I could keep my spirits up. It was that bad. And I was down in Naples, Florida, which is already ultra conservative. And I'm like, oh my God, I worried that this guy's going to carry the day, because it's not like I had some plaintiff-friendly jury. I'm not down in Miami picking a jury. This was a tough venue. And so this guy scared the hell out of me. And I got, the night before closing argument, I spent as much time figuring out what to do with him as how to win my case, because I knew he was the obstacle that was a real problem. When someone was late for closing argument, and the judge says, we're going to wait another 5-10 minutes, and we're going to use the alternate. And I said, who is it? I'm thinking, And it was someone I loved. I went, oh, well, Judge, I think we should wait. If the judge had said it was him, I'd said, Judge, we're going to run out of time. We got to go. Let's go. But it wasn't. But anyway, so they all marched, or my lady got there, thank God. And they march in. And this is what I did with them. And I saved it for rebuttal because I had an okay feeling about the rest of them. And I thought, I've got to isolate this guy. So I came up with using an old adage, and it was strength in number. Everybody's heard the phrase strength in number. So I told the jury in closing, I said, the judges told you this is the greatest system in the world. Is it perfect? No, but it's a great system. Americans are proud of justice. You say justice, we sit up tall in America. And it's because of people like you come and give of your valuable time that makes that ideal a reality. But what makes it so great? What makes us different from the rest of the world? We don't believe in having one person sit and decide it, because one person can be biased for whatever reason. Not bad person, they can be a wonderful person. Everybody's got bias on one subject or another. But you have someone biased on the subject of that case, and it's just one. What chance would justice have? None. And we don't roll the dice with that here. We get in Florida, we have 6 jurors. We get all 6 of you folks here because we believe in strength in number. Because one person can have brought some bias that we did all that jury selection to eliminate it, but it's not a perfect system of what we do in what we call voir dire. It's not perfect, it's good. And sometimes people don't even realize they got a bias. And they answer truthfully, but they had a buried bias that surfaced in the trial. And so we don't have to worry about one person leading to an unjust result, not in the United States of America, because we have strength in number. So I'm asking y'all to remember that. And it's worth staying late for. It's worth fighting for. It's worth using that strength to make sure we don't end up with one person justice like you might have in Russia. Verdict comes in. I'm told it's the largest injury, personal injury, not med mal. I'm heard it was the largest injury case in Naples history. It was a multi-million-dollar verdict on a herniated disc case for a young girl. Actually, I take it back. I'm mixing cases. It was a broken femur case, but she had a little bit of a limp, and she was young. And you think a little bit of limp sounds little. No, she's gonna limp around her whole life. She was like 18 years old.
That's tough.
So it was a very righteous verdict. Yeah. But it was a lot of money for very conservative people, and I had that jackass on there that hated me. They walked in, and they read the verdict, and he did not have the verdict form. Hallelujah. And he came in with his head down. And when they read the verdict, I was so happy. And then I forgot, in Florida, we poll the jurors. Make sure, is that your jury? The judge says, anyone want to poll the jury? I said, no, sir. And
don't give him another shot.
And the other guy goes, Your Honor, yes, we would like it polled. And they got, yes, and got to him. And I thought, oh. And he goes, he put his head down. It was like, felt like an hour. It was probably 5 seconds. He goes, yes. And as soon as that was done, he excused him, he just hauled ass. But those other people on that jury were not having any of his crap. And because they were out like 3.5 hours, so it was all him. And I am convinced that little bit of an old adage, coupled with wrapping it, packaging it as powerfully as I could, strength in number, it empowered those other people to say, you're not driving this in the ground. The last thing I want to say before we wrap up is something I've been doing lately, and it really is not so much an adage or a catchy phrase. It's just a truth. And it's a way when I sense I have a juror, but it's not that obvious. I've started saying, we went through jury selection and we talked about bias. And we worked so hard to make sure we had nobody biased on the juror. And the reason is, bias blinds. Bias blinds people to fairness. Unfair results come from bias. Bias distorts data. In this particular case, I came up with it. I had a data analyst who was scaring the shit out of me. And I said, bias will distort and corrupt data. And data that leads to certain points can end up leading to something different when someone that's really smart, because bias can corrupt data and it certainly can lead to unfair, unjust results. And I didn't want to call this guy out because I wasn't really completely sure, but I had a bad vibe. And I said, but you know what, folks? We don't have to worry about that here because we suffered. You may have wanted to wring my neck during jury selection when I went on and on about bias. But now you've invested a whole week of your time and you care about getting the right result as much as I do. And now none of us have to worry about bias corrupting this verdict because we went through that together. And I trust we got the right people to do the right thing. And why I did it that way was this. I wanted the good jurors to have a weapon. When that juror, if he fought me like I bet he did, they could say, now you said all those things in jury selection, you weren't biased. You're acting biased. And I thought they'd embarrass him to shutting up because he was going to be a power broker. And we got a heck of a good 7-figure verdict. And I don't think I missed on he was bad. I really think it maybe embarrassed him a little and it gave them the right. I couldn't call them out for it. They could. I just taught them how to do it without saying. And if somebody does show bias, you call them out. Call the judge. I didn't want to do that. That's not my style. So we don't need to worry about it.
Bias blinds people to data. Bias blinds people to fairness. Bias leads to unjust results. So while we went through that and it was not pleasant and it took time and the seats were uncomfortable, and you're wondering, is he going to ever ask another, move on? Now you know why. And because you've spent all this time in court, you care now as much as I do about a just result, and we can all rest assured we don't have to worry about that bias coming to play, in this case, with you folks. So I'm glad we suffered through that together. And you know what I've done? When the jackass on the jury starts showing, they slip under my radar, all the rest of them can go, you are biased. You are blinded. I'm empowering the good jurors to shut the one that snuck in there down because no one wants to be biased. It blinds the data to engineers. I get stuck with an engineer on my jury. They're going to hear about how bias blinds data analysis. I throw in data analysis. It blinds them. But we don't have to worry about that here. And you know what the data analyst is going? I don't want to look like I'm biased, blind. So be quiet. Let everybody else decide this damn case.
Yeah, and you were speaking his language too, talking about data for somebody with that background. No, I mean, that's very powerful. I could do this all day. And one of the parts I love about this podcast and what we do here is you get to give practical examples. And because everything you're saying, I'm thinking, I think I could see how that would fit into what I do or this particular situation that I've faced. And I could do this all day. But there's a time limit to these. So Keith, thank you very much. Really enjoyed the conversation today.
Me too.
Well, that was season 3, episode 7 of The Art of Outsmarting. Today we talked about creating the language of the case, specifically as to closing argument. We had some great analogies from Keith and some great ideas from Keith. As you saw, I really enjoyed putting him on the spot and asking about the types of issues we see in our cases and how he deals with them so that I can then steal those ideas and use them in our cases. But truly, I got to say that everything we're doing here this season, that just follows right up on it. Exposing what the defense is doing to mislead the jury and getting them back on the right track. In our next episode, we're going to continue talking about closing, specifically not as much about liability like we did in this episode, but to non-economic and to human damages. And I'm looking forward to that just as well. See you then.